So I'm going to check time here. I'm going to have to breeze through a little bit of the information that's really getting into some of the insurance options for business. But my intention is to cover this in a high level for today, because this is really its own hour if we were to dive into it further. But let's highlight you options for small business insurance. So some types of insurance are requirements and others are optional. So your insurance needs are really going to depend on your physical location, that if you've got customers that come and visit you, if you have employees, if you have company vehicles, and then there might be something that's really specific to your profession. So it's all going to be dependent on some of those factors. Many insurance companies offer a business owner's policy, or a BOP, which combines several coverages into one package. And typically a BOP, a business owner's policy, includes general liability insurance, commercial property insurance, and business interruption insurance. And I'm going to go into that business interruption insurance in a little bit more detail, because it certainly applies to disaster recovery. You could ask your agent or company about what coverages are included in their business owner's policies. And they may also sell coverages separately. So if you guys identify that you have some risk factors and there's a gap that you'd like to cover, then maybe some additional riders that they could add to that policy that fits your unique risk factors. Some kinds of insurance that might be required, such as workers' compensation, those are optional. Again, you might be having employees, so some of those things may come into that picture. This commercial general liability insurance, this is often where we're thinking about kind of like that negligence or accident injury insurance. If your negligence results in damage to a client's property or someone injuring themselves while they're visiting your business premises, or if a customer is hurt by a product that you sell, you may be held responsible. And so this is the type of insurance people are looking for coverage for. Liability insurance covers your business against a range of unintended situations. So bodily injury, damage to other property I mentioned, but it could be something like overstay the job, or if you leave a client's water running and it causes water damage, or it could be personal injury due to like slander or libel, false advertising. Those are other examples this type of insurance could provide coverage for. It's super important to provide accurate estimates of the value of your business and make sure that you're adequately insured. So your agent's going to be able to give you that best estimate, but it's going to be based on the type of information you provide up front. Because again, you don't want to be in a situation where you'd be underinsured. And this is again why we're suggesting that you take a look at that every year, because things change within the business. This does not cover liability insurance for professions such as accounting, real estate agents, that sort of thing. That's where you're going to be looking at like errors and omissions insurance. And then there are insurance coverages that are more umbrella policy too. So they just provide more coverage, more limits, higher limits than your standard liability coverage that you can look at with your agent. Business property insurance, this is where you're covering some physical assets. So thinking about inventory, furniture, machinery, equipment, electronic equipment, computers, valuable papers, valuable documents, signs, fencing, things that aren't attached to a building, non-tangible items such as trademarks, copyrights, those fall into that category of business property insurance. There are some nuances in all of this that I'm probably not going to get into for the time frame, but we know that equipment travels on vehicles and it goes to different job sites, and so there may be some rules that of when are you covered in certain ways of things that are in transit. So those are some things to discuss further with your insurance agent and letting them get to know the type of business that you're in. I do want to share that if you have difficulty finding business or property insurance in the standard insurance market, you can find coverage through the Oregon Fair Plan. So this is a state program. And the Oregon Fair Plan has limited coverage. It covers only like physical building locations, not contents. They don't provide like the business interruption and inventory or cyber related losses, but they can help cover some of the physical assets piece. So that is available if that becomes a challenge for you to find coverage. A little bit about business interruption insurance. And again, since most of our discussion today has been around disasters, when a disaster does strike, again, you may lose property, but you also might lose the ability to continue doing business. So business interruption insurance is really about helping you get going again after disaster. So it could pay the rent or the mortgage, might make up for lost profits, cover a loan payment, payroll, even utilities. So there's a lot of potential benefit there. You are not required to have this kind of insurance. For the policy to be triggered, the operations need to completely cease. So it can't just be a partial shutdown, it has to completely cease for a time. And it requires some kind of a physical loss or damage that's covered under your policy to pay out. So if you just were to receive an evacuation notice and you can operate your business and then nothing happened to the property, that claim will likely be denied because the business interruption wasn't caused by a physical loss, like, there wasn't a fire present. However, if a fire or windstorm required you to shut down your business for a time, you potentially could be covered by, other policy options within, it could be, let me say this again. However, if a fire or windstorm required you to shut down your business for a time, you could potentially be covered with that business interruption insurance. So it's going to be really specific to conditions, and that's where you're going to be wanting to talk with your agent about, what's allowable, or, in kind of that preparation conversation, or the adjuster afterwards, what's going to be allowable. So it's going to be very specific to your contract language. There are some different nuances within business interruption insurance. So for example, contingent business interruption, that's going to be covering income losses related to supply chain interruptions. So I mentioned, you could be impacted by someone else that has had disaster in their area. So for a certain manufacturer that provides your inventory, that is where contingent business interruption insurance may then come into play. And then there's a type of extended business interruption insurance, which is an optional coverage that provides partial reimbursements for a period between when your property is repaired and before your income has returned to its pre-loss levels, because sometimes sales are slower initially, even if you've got your doors back open. So there may be some potential coverage to look at there. I think it's really important to know that there are some disasters that are not covered with this type of insurance without some other type of maybe insurance rider. Flood and earthquake damage is typically not covered. So be sure to understand, what are the types of loss events that your business interruption insurance would cover. According to FEMA, about 25% of small businesses are affected by disaster, never reopen, and only a third of businesses carry this type of insurance. So be thinking about that. And then again, I'm just going to cover this real quick here. Commercial auto insurance. So question for you might be, do you use your personal car for work, have business owned or leased cars, or do you have employees that use their own cars for their work? Personal auto coverage does not cover these risks, but commercial auto insurance does. And that's usually a very early question in a claim of, were you on business or were you on personal business at the time of the accident? Commercial auto insurance will have higher liability limits than personal auto insurance to help protect your business. And there are ways to reduce your risks and manage costs in this area. Part of that's to make sure your staff are well trained and have a good driving record. We highly suggest that you shop the insurance cost before you buy a new vehicle. In some cases, there's might be a more affordable model for what it's going to cost you for insurance. And then you can save on premiums like using safety devices such as anti-theft devices, or if you are regularly parking those vehicles in a garage, or choosing to have higher deductibles. Those are some different options to help manage the costs. And then if you've got equipment that's permanently attached to your vehicle that's expensive to cover in the event of a loss, consider increasing your insurance coverage limits for those types of those types of items. And this is really just to highlight again that there are going to be some types of disasters and some types of loss events that are covered by a standard policy, and there are some that are typically not covered without looking for additional insurance coverages. So fire, power surges, weight of snow and ice, falling objects, wind, hail, theft and vandalism, that's a pretty standard coverage package for most policies. And then we get into earthquake, flood, landslides due to some of those events, general wear and tear, tsunamis, sinkholes. Those are events typically not in your standard policies. So that's something to consider. Is that something I'm potentially looking to face? What are my risk factors there? There are a few ways to protect yourself from these excluded perils. That could be to talk with your agent about what's called a difference in conditions policy, which typically offers all-in-one coverage for landslides, mud flows, earthquakes, and floods, but perils not covered by like that standard policy. Some insurance can add coverage for these excluded perils through like an endorsement to an existing policy. So that might be something to discuss with your agent. Flooding, mud flows, tsunamis, those are going to be covered under a flood insurance policy. And really the place you're going to be purchasing through might be through your agent, but it's going to come through FEMA's national flood insurance program. And in some cases, there's some private insurance companies offering that. And then earthquake policies, that's usually a separate purchase as well. If you're specifically concerned about that hazard. It's expensive. I definitely hear that from people. And again, talking with your agent about some of these events, what your concerns are, what are the costs, what are your options? I think those are just really good planning activities as you weigh what type of coverage you may need. This has a little bit of information more for you around flood insurance for business. Again, remember, flooding insurance is not covered under a typical business property insurance, but it may be required if you're located in a designated floodplain or a federal disaster area. This is something that you do purchase as a separate policy, and there's limits of when coverage starts. So this covers building and contents, and then content coverage is actual value, cash value only, so that depreciated amount, and it does not cover business interruption specifically. You can't call 5 days before where it's looking like it might flood in the zone, or 2 days before, and put a policy in place that when you make a purchase, it actually starts applying 30 days after. So it can't be for, I'm guessing we're going to have an issue here in the next week. It's going to be planned for it ahead of time because it will not activate for 30 days. And then just kind of to wrap up for today, kind of a little summary for some general insurance tips. Always check to make sure your agent or company are licensed in the state of Oregon. You can do that through our office. You keep your agent updated on any changes to your property. Have you purchased more tools, equipments, new vehicles, sold a vehicle, and ask questions. We highly recommend that you don't leave until you clearly understand, what are your rights, what are your responsibilities, what's in your contract, what kind of coverage do you have. If it doesn't make sense, ask more questions. And then if you ever have questions about how these products work, if there's a step you could take, what are your rights? I'd like to have something reviewed. We have that formal complaints process as well to consider with our DFR advocacy team. And this, again, if you want to take a screenshot, these are the ways that you can reach out to our advocacy team, our phone number. We've got emails for our insurance and our financial services folks. And then straight to our website will take you to a portal too, where you could start the complaint process or get to our contact information. And then I'll just put out here a little bit more information on some resources around all kinds of things that are prep and disaster planning that can be some things that help with your own planning, whether it's for your home and your family or for your business. I think these are some really great resources to take a look at. And then I think I'm going to have to stop share to drop my links into the chat. So I will do that right now so that you have those ready and handy. Can I take any questions for anyone?
Yes, let me also stop recording, and yes, please feel free to bring up your questions.